Welcome to another episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, joined on my far, I guess it would be left if you're watching us, but my far right, John Sheeran, my co-host. John, how you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm good, but what matters right now is who's in the middle of us, and I think we should introduce him as well.
That's right. It's a week of special guests, and we've got Tim McGee, former Super Bowl wide receiver with the Cincinnati Bengals. Radio voice of the team, covers the team. We are so excited to have him back on the program. It's been a little while since we had him on, but good to have him on this evening. Mr. McGee, how you doing?
I am doing great. Life is good, even during the pandemic. So just making the best of it.
Well, that's good. I know we're gearing up for the holidays here, and you told us before we took the air you're keeping busy, and part of that is by covering the Cincinnati Bengals, and I guess we're going to start there about the current state of the team. 2-9-1, no franchise quarterback playing for this team anymore, coming off a pretty ugly loss this last week. I guess we all kind of knew this was going to be a growing pains kind of year for the team. I don't think we expected 2-9-1 and no Joe Burrow at this point in the season. So I guess in terms of your expectations for the season and what we've seen so far, how are you gauging things right now?
Plugwood and I, we do the post-game show and sometimes the pre-game show for the Bengals and WLW and iHeart. And one of the things that we've always been perplexed by, this team in particular didn't have a bar, and that was for the last, say, 2 years. Since Zach Taylor has come in as the head coach, you really didn't know what to expect from them. So it was kind of like an invisible bar. If they played up, you're like, oh, okay. They look pretty good today. And if they played down, oh, these are growing pains. So and when we go back a year and a half, or actually a little over a year and a half ago, one thing we identified is the way they played in the very first game against Seattle. We were so impressed with that. We felt, oh, okay, this really looks good. And I'll never forget, I said this to Chick on air. I go, that's probably the best you're going to see them. And of course, I got the why, oh, you're hating on them. No, that was the first time that teams actually had them on film. So now they knew what to expect and they can kind of game plan around. When Zach first comes in, it's the unknown. Defense coordinators don't know what type of offense they're running, so on and so forth. So, and what we learned and what we quickly learned, unfortunately, it was a pass-happy offense, and it was a defense that had many holes. But going into the hire, we felt the messaging was, with my system and that talent, we could be successful. That's what Zach Taylor pretty much interviewed on, and that didn't work out. So when we accelerate up to this year, okay, now we have the number one draft pick in Joe Burrow, and we know how outstanding that is and could be the potential of that. And then we had some upgrades on the defensive side of the football. So like you said, never in our wildest dreams or nightmares did we think the team would be at the stage with only 2 wins and no wins on the road for the second straight year. So those statistics speaks for themselves. Unfortunately, how do you continue to go to work? How do you continue to motivate? So doubt starts creeping in, rightfully so. The locker room starts getting a little contentious, rightfully so. You start hearing about the coach getting fired, rightfully so. You start hearing about everything, the bickering that goes in the locker room. And this is what losing does. It becomes so addictive that it becomes contagious. And that's where you are right now with the ball club. Sadly, that's where you are.
That Seattle game feels like 10 years ago at this point. But when we interviewed you back in March, I actually re-listened to the interview because it was such a great one. It was a great one for this program. And if anyone hasn't listened to that, they should check that out from this past March. But you said in that interview that, the NFL is not college, that you don't get 3 years to turn around a team. The time moves a lot faster. With everything that's happened this year, with the injuries and obviously Burrow going down and all the other commotion that's happened in the locker room, how do you judge this coaching staff? Do they deserve that third year with everything that's happened, or is it just it's just the way it is? It's the NFL.
It's just the way it is in the NFL. However, this organization is a little different than how it's done throughout the NFL. They're very loyal. They give coaches a little bit more room to be successful. But this coaching staff, sadly, and I'm a big supporter of Zach Taylor. I want him to succeed. I want to make sure that's on record. I would love, but I look at the reality of things, and I would be insulting the fans' intelligence by saying things such as they're going to get there. There are literally no indicators, none, that I can think of where you can hinge your hat and say, if this scenario happens, there's not enough Band-Aids in the box to fix all the leaky holes that the team has. When you talk about Burrow getting hurt, although we were sadly disappointed, but none of us was shocked. None of us. Every game we watched, we were like cringing. Every throw, every tackle, every sack, every pass rush, every time we were cringing. We were never, as a fan base, relaxed to say, oh, he's going to be in a nice, comfortable pocket. We knew it was a matter of time, and all we were guessing on and hoping and praying the severity of the injury wasn't what it actually turned out to be. So once again, you have to look at that and go, you had one job. Your number one job on this coaching staff was to protect your franchise. He's the future of this franchise. He can be the sole reason why the Bengals are still in Cincinnati after their lease is up. So that's how important protecting Joe Burrow could turn out to be. And that was a failure. It was an epic failure. So you have to judge on that. You can't, I want to judge on Zach Taylor is, from what I understand, is one of the nicest men you can be around. And I look at a Dave Shula, who I personally played under, and he was the same way. But from a leadership standpoint, how do you get these guys motivated when all they know is failure under him? When I say, as a coach, when I say, and I'm preaching to my ball club, hang in there, things are going to turn. Where's that coming from? Where's that vast experience, that knowledge, that understanding? When have you been through that storm before? So these things they're natural. They're not concocted. They're not someone bad-mouthing or feeling bad or wants this thing to go in a negative direction. It's just the reality of the whole entire situation is, it is what it is, and it hadn't gotten any better.
You've seen him play 8 seasons, outstanding seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's the pregame and postgame voice of the Bengals, covering them on the radio. It's Tim McGee joining us on the Orange and Black Insider and the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. Happy to have him with us. You mentioned his name, Tim, and I guess I got to go there because a lot of fans make that general equation of Zach Taylor and David Shula. And you played for one of the best coaches in team history in Sam Weish, and you played for one of the worst in terms of win-loss records in David Shula. The parallels that you're seeing there in your eyes, because you played for David Shula, I would really like to hear if those parallels ring true based on what you've seen from Zach Taylor. And does Zach Taylor deserve another chance, maybe with a staff under him shakeup? Do you see that would be something that would work well for the Bengals going into next season, or is it in your estimation still kind of maybe thinking about time to blow things up?
Let's talk about the staff shakeup first, and then I'll get to the comparison between the two coaches. There's a natural progression in the National Football League. First, the coach comes in his first year, and he blames the lack of success, if you will, on the previous regime. Okay, that guy he left me when it's like politics. He left me in a real bad position. That's what they're gonna say. The second year is going to be, that's really my true honeymoon period. Now I'm starting to get the guys in that I need, and we're going to go out here and we're going to fight, but we're not there yet. But you got to go back. You got to go back to the interviewing process. And when the interviewing process says, again, with that talent in my system, we can be successful. In year 2, you took a guy, in year 1 and year 2, you took a guy named Joe Mixon. You hadn't used him. These are just facts. I mean, they're just facts. You have never established a running game. You couldn't protect your biggest asset, your best asset. Okay, so what do you do now? How are you going to fire the offensive coordinator when the head coach is calling the plays? There lies a major problem. Okay, how are you going to get rid of the defensive coordinator? Well, you've never fired anyone. Here's the problem. When you look at that staff, you see no vast experience. You don't see a guy like a Jack Del Rio on there that you, as an inexperienced coach, and we've all been there. It's not just being a head coach. When you first start doing podcasts, we had to start somewhere. When I did my first radio show, it was my first radio show. But did you have someone across from you or to your side or that had your back that you can turn to and say, how should I handle this situation? What should I do? What's your thoughts on this? That staff didn't have that. They had a bunch of renegades that did not have, let's just face it, a lot of success. Now, one thing I'll give them, they must have some hell of a interviewing skills to get the job because there's only 32. And they were smart enough, wise enough, and they did a damn good job in getting a head coaching job. And as far as the comparison between the two head coaches of Dave Shula and Zach Taylor, obviously it's two totally different eras. But what I saw in Dave Shula, he tried to do that. He was really, really inexperienced, and in my opinion, he wasn't ready. And when I say ready, he just wasn't ready because I guess the bird's eye view from my standpoint is Dave Shula was my wide receivers coach. And I knew how unprepared he was to be a wide receiver coach, let alone a head coach. I mean, we would be in the meetings and he would ask Eddie Brown and myself, hey, what do we do on this? What's the site adjustment, blah, blah, blah. So he was learning and he was a student. He was a student of the game. There's no question about it. But he was not in any way, shape, or form ready to be the head job, to take the head job. I see the similarities in Zach where I think Zach is more of a John Madden type of head coach. He thinks he can do it, and his ego probably has him really convinced that he can do it. But when you get out there in these game situations, you have to recognize fourth down, it's not a down that you go for it every other time. When it's 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 or a second and short, you got to learn how to run the ball. You got to learn how to say, man, oh, we must beat the guy in front of me. I must outperform that guy in front of me. That's how we will win football games, especially when you're in an environment in the Midwest with inclement weather in the wintertime. You know, so these fundamentally, you knew Zach would make some mistakes. But God, by God, we didn't think it would be this bad. And after that last game, guys, I can tell you that was just we try to defend, protect. It was beyond. I mean, we kind of threw in the towel, go, okay, just go ahead, let us have it, because you can't go back through when we get Joe Mixon back and we get this guy back and we do this and we do that. We were playing the hell out of the game of scenarios, and just people are not going to buy it anymore, and rightfully so.
I guess that's a good segue, because just thinking about that last game of Miami as a former player, like what goes through your mind when you see all those ejections happening and basically all the commotion down there?
I thought was, from a critical sense, I thought, isn't this what the fans said, that Marvin Lewis teams wasn't disciplined, that they quit? I mean, you were like going to check. This is what they said. This is what they said. And after the game, first of all, I looked at the Miami Dolphins going into the game. I look at the Miami Dolphins and I look at the Cleveland Browns. And the reason I look at those teams, because I felt those are fair comparisons of where the Bengals should be. Because obviously, remember, it wasn't last year, Miami and the Bengals were fighting. This is a kind of a terrible statement here, fighting for first place in the draft, which meant last place in the league. So obviously Miami gets it. So how is Miami ascending at such a rate? I think they're a little overrated, but nevertheless, how are they winning games? And the Bengals are still in the same exact position. How is Cleveland, the Cleveland Browns in the AFC North, guys? Look at it. It pains us, but I'm from Cleveland, so, mixed emotions here. But it pains you to sit there and go, look at the makeup of the Cleveland Browns, meaning go position by position. Number 1 pick and quarterback, 2-star receivers, adequate tight end, weak offensive line. You look at offensive defense, you go, wait a minute. They could switch uniforms and they look the same. So why is one team succeeding and the other team isn't? That's when I was looking at the Miami Dolphins, to answer your question directly, that's what bothered me the most, that they were ascending in a very positive way, and the Bengals were still status quo, which meant they haven't gotten themselves out of the bottom of the pack.
Talking with Tim McGee, former wide receiver with the Cincinnati Bengals and pregame, postgame radio voice covering the games of the Cincinnati Bengals. Happy to have him with us once again. One of our favorite guests. He brings it every time he's with us. We appreciate his time. Let's kind of try and spin some positives. The number 85 in Cincinnati Bengals history is quite special. Isaac Curtis, yourself, you had Chad, you had Tyler Eifert, and now you got T. Higgins. And T. Higgins, kind of a little bit of a slow start for the season, but really has ascended and become the number one receiver. AJ Green doesn't look like the old AJ Green, and whoever's playing quarterback for this team has really started to look at T. Higgins quite a bit in the passing game. Your thoughts on him, especially since he's donning your old jersey number out there on the field for the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well, let me say this before I get to praising T. Higgins. Part of his success is the fact that A.J. Green's out there still taking the number one corner. So T. Higgins is getting the third corner, and that's a mismatch, and that's great for the Bengals. Don't get me wrong. I'm just strategically, A.J. still commands the number one guy. He had Xavier Howard on him in the Miami game. Tyler Boyd is going to get the number two guy, and T. Higgins is a definitely mismatch for any third cornerback from the opposing teams. And with that being said, he has totally taken advantage of that. He is a special talent, and he will continue to get better and better and better. When you look at him, it makes you wonder, how in the world did that kid get drafted in the second round with that type of talent? I mean, he has it all. Yeah, he has the range. He has the ability. He's going across the middle, and that was the one thing I guess we all kind of questioned is how tough is he? And, he's showing some toughness. And I think it's funny when you look at that number 85 jersey, and you look at Isaac, it's funny because I get called, and it's a generational thing. I've been with Chad where someone didn't recognize me, and they'll go, the original 85 to Chad. And then they'll say to me when I'm the original 85. Then I'm going to be with Isaac, the original 85. I'm like, well,
yeah, I know my history.
I don't know Tyler Eifert as well. But, it kind of is. If you do look at, if you're that big sports fan, and you look at the game and you're looking for something positive, and we got diehard, including myself, Bengal fans that no matter win or lose or draw, we're still in there. Yeah, we've, as they say, we die hard, so we died a lot of times, but we always surge back up. Okay. But when you have a number with so much prestige behind it, and you're a part of that, that feels good to me in a personal way, because people continue to identify that number. And when I know, and this is real special, and I know sometimes we say things that are very cliches, but when I know, and coming up, I used to watch Isaac Curtis play, and that was a wow factor for me, all crap aside. That was a true, never in my wildest imagination as a snotty-nosed kid in Cleveland, Ohio, would I ever think that somebody would ever even talk about me in the same sense. So I could never think of it because it just wasn't a part of my mind. Then not only that, when I see that generation before me, and then I become a part of a generation, it's kind of like the University of Tennessee with Willie Gault and so on and so forth. Then I see Chad take over, and I see him doing interviews talking about myself and Isaac. It makes you, it gives you some self-gratification. Then you see Tyler Eifert, and now you kind of feel bad for the guys because now they got a lot of pressure on them. They got mass pressure to produce. And that, to me, that is just, it's like I said, it's very gratifying, and at the same time, it's very uplifting, if you will.
Just stick on that.
My dog actually had a couple comments too.
Yeah, it was positive, very positive feedback about his memories as well. But sticking on that,
my dog was saying, "Way to go, 85, way to go, 85."
But I guess sticking on that topic though, because I think we can all kind of assume that AJ Green's time is probably done in Cincinnati, and then the next logical progression is for T. Higgins to kind of ascend into that role. What are you looking for him as he continues to develop? What can he do better to make sure that he can tackle those number one corners on a week-to-week basis?
Well, man, that's tough because the hardest part to deal with from a number 3 receiver going to number 2, going to number 1 is it's very easy when you're not game planned. When the defensive coordinator on Tuesday is not saying we got to stop that guy. That's the guy we must control, and you are going to cover that guy, whether it's all over the field, whatever it may be. So when you have that, he's going to have to adjust, and you'll probably see a lull, at the beginning of next year. You'll see a lull. He will maybe not be as successful as he is right now, but then he'll start learning ways to attack. And because at first time you're looking over, you're like, okay, this is really easy. Then he gets out there and they go, well, wait a minute, I'm not getting the separation that I'm used to last year. But the quality of the cornerback is now has risen. So he's going to have to learn how to adjust to someone. Right now, he is the superior talent. He's going to learn that sometimes he's going to line up and be the inferior talent. And he's going to have to learn mentally how to from a strategic standpoint. He's going to have to learn how to get open without physical skills. Physical skills is going to have to be a secondary thing to get him open.
Tim, before I get to my next question, we'll just take up a couple more minutes of your time, if you don't mind. We appreciate all of the time that you've given to us. Just going to get to a couple of quick comments and questions in our live chats here. Mike Holbrook, I think Mike. Tell Tim I said hi. I wanted to share that one with you. Mike's a good friend of this show. Larry Wilson Jr., Tim McGee equals Bengal legend. Thought you'd like that one. And then, I don't know, just a real quick one. Are you still in touch with Eddie Brown and Rodney Holman, two of your other excellent teammates? Okay. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, we talk, and then anytime, what we typically do as former players, if you don't live here in Cincinnati, when you go, like Eddie lives in Miami, so when I'm in Miami, I see him all the time.
Tim, I guess I will wrap things up a little bit here. Put yourself, if you will, in the Bengals GM chair. I know that doesn't really exist, but if you put yourself in the Bengals GM chair for next year, in terms with coaching staff aside, how do you approach the offseason? There's some people in a camp of, hey, take those high picks once again and use them the way you did in 2020. Or because of the massive roster holes and impending free agents and all of that, maybe you move back a little bit this time, collect some more picks, round out the roster. What are kind of some of the positions you would attack in your approach to the draft based on what we've seen this year and what's needed for next year?
Listen, do more listening. If someone wants to throw you a Herschel Walker deal, take it. Other than that, stay where you are, with the plans of taking the big tackle out of Oregon or the tackle out of Alabama. Upgrade your right guard in free agency. Solidify the middle and Jonah Williams on the left side. You're good there. So you've upgraded your talent level on the offensive line, and commit to the run, understanding how to run the football. Bring in a run specialist from a running back coach or a offensive line coach, because they're going to have to do it, no question about it. Go to the defensive side of the ball, improve your second and third level. You're probably going to see Geno Atkins move on. So you're going to have a lot of cap room between Carlos Dunlap, who's gone, AJ Green, 16 to 17 million, and Geno's salary. So you're going to have some flexibility as far as dollars are concerned. So you just got to utilize those dollars and make a commitment to the staff on what you want to do. This staff can no longer, on the offensive side of the ball especially, can no longer be a pass-happy staff. Because, again, we are assuming Joe Burrow will come back. But here's the thing we don't know. We don't know when he's coming back, what week that will be, and we don't know what level he will play when he returns. So we have to take into account that, and you have to protect him with one way and one way only. Run the football. You must run the football.
I know Anthony didn't say anything about coaches, but do you consider bringing back Marvin Lewis in any capacity? He was in the news today.
Well, I mean, he's not going to come back here. One thing about a head coach, he would never come back. I mean, that's something he wouldn't even consider coming back here as an understudy. That just wouldn't happen. So I don't think we'll see him back in this particular city. But I really do think it's going to be it's imperative they do it, but it's going to be hard to get a veteran coach to come in and help lead this young staff in the right direction. And they're in order to get some butts in the seats if the pandemic's over, they're going to need to make some changes on the coaching staff. The player side of it is not going to get butts in the seats. They're going to need to bring some names in here on the maybe even as an offensive coordinator, but definitely as a defensive coordinator.
Do you think Marvin would fare better in a different organizational structure where there's not so much, I don't know what you would want to call it, maybe responsibility pressure that is put on Bengals coaches because of the smaller scouting staff, lack of a true GM, that sort of thing? Do you think Marvin would fare better, or is it going to be more of the same just if you land somewhere else?
Hell yeah, he'll fare better. I mean,
this is why we ask these questions.
I absolutely love the Bengals management. I'm so loyal to them for obvious reasons. But come on now, I mean, there's not a head coaching job here that has much details, and you're wearing about 45 hats in 24 hours a day. So again, head coaches don't have to go evaluate talent and do all this and do all that. And Marvin did bring them to the 21st century. Let's just be honest here. So. But no, I'm pretty sure Marvin will want a head coaching job where he can just coach and, the GM and rely and have the confidence in the general manager to give him the right talent to fit his system so he can be successful.
Tim McGee, former Bengals wide receiver, joined us. We asked for about 15 minutes. You gave us close to 30. Tim, I greatly appreciate it. You brought the fire tonight as expected, and man, we'd love to continue having you on this program. I'm not blowing smoke here. My co-host and I were on a collaborative podcast recently. We were asked who was some of our favorite guests. You were answer number one. So you continue to bring it. I enjoyed watching you play when I was a little guy, and am just thrilled that you've been on this program. So can't thank you enough. Where can our listeners find you on pregame, postgame radio? And then I know you also have a Sprinter van rental business as well in the Cincinnati area.
We have Sprint. Well, I have a couple of things, but the Sprinter is just sprinterrental.com. And you can get me on Facebook, obviously. And we're on WLW 700 iHeart. We're on Sunday, typically 5:30 to 8:30, and wish us well, pray for us because we hadn't had a lot positive to talk about. And by the way, since I'm your number one guy on your show, wait till you get my bill, man. Wait till I send that bill. Look at it. Look at that face right there.
Go on, Anthony. He's the one that brings in the money here.
Sounds like the Bengals management now. Come on, man. No, I appreciate you guys having me on.
I greatly appreciate it. I hope we can have you on again real soon, Tim.
Just give me a call. I appreciate it, guys.
All right. Take it easy.
Right.
Thanks again. Okay.
That was Tim McGee, one of the Bengals' top 50 players of all time, ranked on their 50th anniversary of the franchise as of a couple of years ago. John, dude's just awesome. I mean, good God. That was as good, if not maybe better than the first time around.
It makes a difference. Like sometimes, even for me, like I get hesitant about asking certain questions, but when you know that you're going to just get the honest, candid truth, you can throw those questions in there. You can get some gems. So, he said that he wasn't sure, or he would be astounded if him, the snotty-nosed kid from Cleveland, would be mentioned with the same names as Isaac Curtis, the snotty-nosed kid from Westchester, Ohio, and me. He's now interviewing Tim McGee. So, life kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, I vividly, some of my very first games watching as a young guy, I'm dating myself here, but I remember him making some awesome plays in that Boomer Esiason and Sam Weish offense. And it's really cool to have him on the program just because I loved him as a player and then what he brings knowledge-wise. And I like what you said there, John, because, he's a guy, he said it himself. He's loyal to the management, right? He left the team. And then when David Shula was still the coach, he came back after, for a year there. He loves the Bengals management. He loves the team, but he is not afraid to criticize where the team needs to be criticized. And, it was kind of both barrels that's what we wanted to ask him. We wanted to ask him about management style, maybe a little Marvin Lewis, and then it was both barrels on the coaching staff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's everything that we want to hear, because we have thoughts on that, and to hear it from someone else with another perspective, or maybe a more informative perspective with some actual anecdotal experience, it helps, and I think our listeners appreciate it as well.
Yeah, kind of validates a little bit of of what we say here. When a guy like Tim McGee kind of corroborates some of our opinions, so that was really enjoyable. Really, really enjoyable. We apologize that we had a little snafu last week in getting him. We promoted that he was going to be with us, but getting him now this time was awesome. And we're going to try and get you a few more special guests here on the podcast coming up before the new year, just to kind of round out the year. We're going to try and get some more special guests, and we'll definitely keep you updated on that. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, which includes our show, Orange is the New Black, by Ace and Zim, as well as the Chalk Talk episodes from Matt Minnick. He also spearheads the Narragansett Beer pregame show. So we try and bring you stuff basically every day of the week if we can. A lot of different content and a lot of stuff on game day as well. John is part of that pregame show. They do a great job anchoring that thing, getting you set towards kickoff. And you can get all of our stuff on basically any audio platform that you have, as well as on our YouTube channel. If you go right under John's left shoulder, you got to get used to John's left shoulder there. That you can click that, subscribe to our YouTube channel, get notified when we go live, etc. So we're going to get to some more stuff here. We've got a stat of the week that John's going to present to us in a second, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys game coming up here on Sunday, and then we will wrap up the show.
So this is our stat of the week, and it's usually, I like to make it on more on the advanced side, but this team is just at a point where it's like I'm not sure the effort's really worth it there. So I'm gonna hat tip to Jay Morrison here, who covers the Bengals for The Athletic. The stat of the week is not really a stat; it's more just a number, and the number is 5. And 5 players now have won Player of the Week in the week of the game that they played the Bengals. Kyle Van Noy was the latest for the Miami Dolphins. He had 3 sacks against the Bengals offensive line. The 4 other players were Patrick Queen for the Ravens in week 5, Baker Mayfield week 7 with the Browns, Ben Roethlisberger week 10, and Tress Way, the punter of the Washington football team, week 11. So 5 players have been named Player of the Week in either offensive or defensive or special teams or whatever when they've played and also beaten the Bengals. That's where we're at.
Does that surprise you? I mean, that's got to be. Is it a record? I mean, I don't. I saw that today and I was like, oh my god, really?
Like, it's not a stat, but I think it just needs to be shared. It's incredible. It truly is.
It is. If you don't mind me encroaching on your stat of the week territory, John, this has probably been shared quite a bit, but it is a next-gen stat by Zebra Technologies. Got this from NFL Communications on Tyler Boyd. I'll try and bring a little bit of positivity again to the show here. Tyler Boyd gained 68 yards after the catch over expectations, otherwise known as YACOE, Y-A-C-O-E, on his 72-yard reception. It was the most YACOE on a reception this season by any NFL wide receiver. So at least the Bengals, as they maybe are setting a negative record by allowing so many players get Player of the Week against them, Tyler Boyd did have, at least for now, the top YACOE, yards after catch over expectation. So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Like I said it when it initially happened, and upon further review 72 hours later, I think it's still unequivocally the best play of Drew Sample's career. Like he's the one who made that play possible. He blocked the cornerback and allowed Boyd to get free. So I guess that's what you draft in the second round. 67 yards after catch over expectation. Yep.
Nice play by Boyd. And really, I guess we can talk a little bit before we move into the Dallas game. I guess we can talk a tiny bit about this game if we have to. Pretty ugly one. We talked a little bit about it with Tim McGee just a few minutes ago. But John, what I got out of this was it looked like a lot of frustration from losing, frustration at the coaching staff, probably, and also poor coaching techniques in some instances that spilled over in this one. I mean, I think back to when AJ Green in 2017 went ham on Jalen Ramsey in that game, and everyone was like, what? Where did that come from? I felt that was still a spillover from the losing from that Steelers playoff loss. And now you've got guys like Sean Williams stomping on players on video. You've got Mike Thomas. One of the punt coverage things wasn't a big deal to me. I didn't think that was, I thought it was pretty good. But the second one was, oh boy. And then you've got guys throwing swings. I mean, it was just a mess. So your takeaways there based on what you saw this last Sunday.
There's still a certain portion of this fan base that is infatuated with the idea of just becoming the Steelers, embodying what they think the Steeler way is, which is more or less just playing dirty. And that was what it was. That was the worst part of that desire on display. I mean, the Mike Thomas thing, I don't know if it was dirty, but the second time you can't go early again. Otherwise, that's the clear and rightful perception and narrative of the play. I know that Sean Williams got like backside block, but that I think happened after he clearly stepped on Solomon Kidney's calf, which is if the roles were flipped, if the jerseys were flipped, everybody would be up in arms about Sean Williams doing that. So, and I know like the Brian Flores thing, that obviously wasn't a good look for him. But at that point, like one team is losing, one team has been losing for the past 5 years, and when things get out of control like that, that's what the narrative. That's what the narrative is, and that's you live with that and you accept that, and you can either grow from that and improve, or you can continue being an irrelevant laughingstock, and that's exactly what they are. People were talking about, is Zach Taylor going to get fired? If this game happens in Week 17, and this is the lasting impression that the Brown family has with the offseason, I think it's entirely possible. Like, they're lucky that this isn't the last game of the year, because this is the type of games that have serious repercussions. Not just losing and losing badly in terms of just on-play performance, but just how ugly it was. Like, this is everything that I was told the 90s were, because I didn't watch very much Bengals 90s football. I was just an infant. But I mean, it's bad. It's really bad.
It really was very, very similar to some of the 1990s, not the fun Jeff Blake 1990s or the little flash in the pan boomer 1997 Bengals. We're talking, Paul Justin. We're talking Achilles Smith. I mean, it's just the at one point, John, in the second half, the Bengals had more players ejected than yards on offense. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And, to your point, I thought you put out a good tweet too. I should have teed this up for people to see it, but you put out, it's one, you kind of alluded to the fact of, there's maybe some talk that if Taylor loses out, he still may be safe, but there is a way that you lose that can cost you your job. And that kind of stuff. And I didn't actually see the Sean Williams thing until the next day. The way I was watching the game and stuff, I didn't see it until the next day. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? But those are the kinds of things that are on film that you go, that's inexcusable if you're a coaching staff. And I didn't find the first hit to be in agreement with you. I didn't find the first hit by Mike Thomas to be anything. I thought it was it was bang, bang play, but it was, to me, a pretty nice special teams play. The second one, though, after you get penalized, the fact that you don't have the wherewithal to pull back and then you make an even more egregious play the second time shortly after, that's just a sign of a lack of discipline across the board and on the roster at this point. And that's, unfortunately, it's one thing if you're losing poorly because you don't have Joe Burrow, you got a bad offensive line, but it's another thing when you have these discipline issues on film.
It's symbolic, it's the second time that Turner and the staff have played his former employer in the Dolphins, and it's just like the narrative surrounding both teams entering this game, how the directions of both teams have gone so differently since both those coaches have been hired. And I guarantee you the Dolphins front office is thinking to themselves, like we employed these guys, like Taylor, Turner, who started Michael Jordan inexplicably and had to bench him with 10 snaps to go. That's where we were, but this is where we are now. And we're 8-4 and about to go to the playoffs, and they're an irrelevant laughingstock. I'll say it again.
Yeah, and Kyle Van Noy beforehand, or the day after, he was on the Pat McAfee show, talked about how he knew he was going to have a field day, which he did. I think he had 3 sacks on the day, hat trick. The team had 6 or 7 on the day against the Cincinnati. I mean, you start to lose count after a half a dozen. It's just ridiculous. So, those are the types of things where you just go, man, this is not the quote unquote culture that Zach Taylor is preaching about. I see Jonathan, not that one, Jonathan Thomas here. Why are people saying Taylor is safe? We're literally half a game better than last year. I understand, Jonathan, and I think John understands as well that sentiment. But I mean, you just heard Tim McGee. If you listen to him, you know that this is a very conservative ownership group, one that is very loyal and one that is very, very hesitant to pull the plug. That's why Marvin Lewis got as much time as he did. So, I mean, I think it's not necessarily a fan plea that he's safe. I think it's just the fact that we've seen a track record here with this ownership and management group. And John, here's my worry is that even if you get rid of Taylor, if you get rid of assistants or both, if you clean house, those are likely still a symptom of what's above them in terms of how they run the team. And I think with Marvin Lewis garnering interest this week and him kind of being back in the headlines and whatnot, that's why I asked him the question about how do you think he'd fare elsewhere? And he said he would fare a lot better because of the responsibilities that are placed on coaches. When you have an inexperienced guy like Zach Taylor, this is the product when you take on too much as an inexperienced guy, I think. And it's a symptom of a problem above him.
There's 2 ways to this, because like the whole patience narrative, I'm saying that word a lot and I don't mean to. I need to expand my vocabulary. I think that's obviously skewed with Marvin Lewis, because Marvin Lewis had great success in his first 3 years, and that essentially earned him a lifetime contract when he won the division in 2005 and gave him all the time in the world, probably too much time at the end of the day. Like in the 90s, I mean, Dave Shula lasted 3.5 years, Kozlet lasted 3 or something, and Dick LeBeau lasted 2.5 or 2. And those coaches had more wins at this point than Zach Taylor does. So this might be new territory, or just might be going back to the pre-Lewis era, where it's just if you don't show anything in your first few years, even Marvin went, I think 8-8 in 2004 or somewhere around 500. So at least he showed promise and earned that loyalty that he eventually got from Mike Brown. I don't know if Taylor necessarily gets that if he doesn't show anything in the near future. Now he might get the start of the 2021 season regardless, because they want to try to give him one last shot. And if things don't turn out good in the start of next year, then I think it becomes a legitimate thing. But I don't know if he goes into 2021 with 4.5 wins, how much is that patience actually matter? How much have we seen in the history of Mike Brown owning this team? Does he really have that much patience for that little losing to start? Because he didn't really show it for Kozlet and Shula like that. And even they had more success than Taylor did.
Right. And now you're talking about, a 1-3 record against the Cleveland Browns, which, that doesn't sit well with Mike Brown and his family. You've got no division. Well, you got the 1 division win against the Browns, but you're 1 in whatever against the division, 0 road wins. I mean, the numbers just start stacking up. And, going back to what I was talking about as the coaching staff being a symptom of a greater problem. I mean, I know a lot of us, including myself, love the idea of another unproven, hungry, young, offensive-minded head coach. But given what this team throws on the lap of a head coach in terms of overall responsibility, and they have to have their hands in everything, you almost wonder if an old school, experienced coach, maybe if it is a guy from way back in the Wayback Machine, a Bill Cowher, a Shanahan Sr., or whatever, that have Super Bowl pedigrees, and they know the NFL, they have a lot of experience. Maybe that's a better route just simply for the Cincinnati Bengals, even though it's not a sexy type of coaching hire.
No, yeah, that's exactly what I meant to say following that previous point. If Taylor does get fired, they're going to get somebody who's not only more experienced, but has better connections to hire better assistants, to bring in better assistants, because that's also been, if not equally, or if not more detrimental, equally detrimental to the failures that we've seen here. Taylor's overall staff is just terrible, and he just like with Sean McVay, like, he at least had Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator. He at least had some type of experienced leadership to kind of lean on as he grows as a head coach. Taylor, they knew he had to grow. They knew he had to go through some growing pains to begin. They didn't think it was going to be this bad, but they, trusted him to find guys to lean on, and while he's still learning on the job, and guys like Anarumo and Turner, while they've been loyal servants to him, they have not helped the case and have not made the team better in any way, shape, or form. So if they do go out and get a new coach, I agree with you. It's going to be somebody who is more experienced, who's more experienced as a play caller, and just has better connections and better relationships with other assistants that he can bring in. If they keep Taylor and they go the route of trying to rebuild the staff under him, they have to at least sell the notion that this guy, Taylor, is not going to get fired in the middle of the season, because who the hell would want to coordinate the defense? Which qualified candidate would want to coordinate this defense if he has any inkling that Taylor's going to get fired midway through the season? Because he's not going to commit career suicide like that and look for a new job in the beginning of 2022. Like that's a tough thing to sell, but that's exactly what these guys around the league who are vying for some of these positions are thinking about. If they believe that Taylor's seat is boiling hot to start 2021, it's going to be hard to attract some of those guys.
Yeah, that's a great point. Look, I mean, John and I sometimes get accused of being, too negative or too hard on these coaches or what have you. Look, I mean, I think we echo Tim McGee's sentiments in that we think Zach, from what we know of him, John, you spoke to him in an interview, and we have it on the podcast, I think, from last year. You met with him and he spoke. Hell of a nice guy, right? I mean, you want him to do well. We want him to do well, but the numbers are starting to speak for themselves, and the guys that have left or have forced their way out or whatever, there's some fire with that smoke, and we got to call it like we see it.
Exactly, and I think it I don't want to say it's not fair to Taylor, because he did take on the responsibility, and he's a grown man, and he knew the risks of this, and whether he was unqualified or not, like this is his job, and he has to do it to the best of his ability. And if the best of his ability is this, then he's just not qualified. And regardless of what I think about him personally, like I spoke with him, I think he's a nice dude, and everything that we've heard about him, he's just a nice guy. Like, we can question some of his relationships with his associates and colleagues, but just from my personal experience, he was fair to us, like me, Jake Lisco, and Nick Manchester for Cincy Jungle. He was fair with us and gave us honest answers and gave us time. And I think that's all you can really ask for someone in my situation. But, and I think he handles, facing the music pretty well too. There's like, it's not an arrogance, but it is sort of like a suave, like, coolness, I guess, too.
Yeah.
He doesn't really get rattled when, obviously, there's warranted criticism coming his way. He continuously says the right things. He just doesn't really apply it, maybe because he just doesn't know how to, and he doesn't have those qualified, experienced assistants to really help him out with this. So he was dealt a tough hand, more than most rookie head coaches, but like, this is the reality, and the Browns have to make the best decision.
Yeah, this was interesting here. Kip Hudson, the numbers are not speaking for themselves. They're screaming at the top of their lungs. So, yeah. Anyway, let's transition, John, into the next game on the schedule here. This would have been another one that would have been really interesting had Joe Burrow remained healthy. But nevertheless, there's still some very interesting storylines here because Andy Dalton makes his return to Cincinnati. The Dallas Cowboys are in a rough spot, and it's not just because of the up and down play of Dalton, who has come in for Dak Prescott. It is because their offensive line is a mess. Their defense is a shambles. They can't, if they ever want to get the run game going, this is the week to potentially do it because the Cowboys are like dead last in a lot of different running game categories. Your first impressions of this game as Andy Dalton makes his return to Cincinnati?
Not only the running game, but the pass rush, like their tackles. I think what I don't even know. Like Brandon Knight was a basketball player. The last time I checked, he's at left tackle. Terrence Steele, who was terrible at the Senior Bowl, he was terrible at Texas Tech. He's been starting at right tackle. He's PFF's second to last graded right tackle. Like, if there's any time for Carl Lawson and Sam Hubbard to pop off, this would be the game to do it. And who else but the quarterback in Andy Dalton that can't handle pressure to save his life? Cooper, Gallup, CD Lamb, those guys are all great. And I think they can have some success against the Bengals cornerback. They have Darius Phillips coming back for the first time. He may be a little bit rusty. William Jackson's going to have his hands full with Amari Cooper. And I was told that Zeke Elliott played pretty well against the Ravens. I didn't watch that game at all, but I was told that he looked like his former productive self. So there's an opportunity for a breakout game for Zeke there. I remember the last time that they played, Zeke had like 140 yards and like a 60-yard touchdown back in 2016. So I'm sure he remembers that. But yeah, it kind of seems like a completely movable force versus a completely stoppable object when you talk about really both units of both teams. Like the Bengals offense can't help themselves to save their lives, but the Cowboys defense can't stop anything to save their lives. And it's just like, which of these inept units is going to be forced to win this game, And I think this is the last winnable game on the Bengals schedule. But even still, like if Zeke and Pollard can just get something going against this defense, I don't know if Brandon Allen has the firepower to kind of match it.
Yeah, this is either going to be a really sloppy, ugly, terrible game to watch, or this is going to be a high-scoring, fun game to watch with a lot of teams just kind of creating big plays, even with a Brandon Allen under center for the Bengals. I mean, these defenses are struggling. There's attrition all over these rosters in terms of injuries and COVID and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities for big plays. It's just a matter of if those teams will take advantage of that. The Andy Dalton thing, do you expect him to just have this outstanding showing just because, he's going to have a little extra fire? And aside from better draft positioning for the Bengals, do you want him to come in here and light it up, whether it's maybe to send a message to Bengals management about Zach Taylor or his own abilities? I don't know. How are you hoping for an Andy Dalton big game, or are you just indifferent about it?
I mean, at this point, in terms of predicting what the Bengals will do, I just assume the worst. So I would imagine I think he's played pretty decently in recent weeks. I know he played well against the Vikings a couple weeks ago, but for all intents and purposes, he had some good moments against the Ravens, even though he had some classic fail in the face of pressure moments. But I mean, it's the Ravens in primetime. People should have expected that anyways. But yeah, I think the fact that he's still got good receivers and he's going up against a defensive line that can't rush the passer for Jack, like that's the definite opportunity for him to just kind of stick it to the Browns or whatever motivation he has. I think he understood why they had to move on from him, but I think he's still a little bitter about him getting benched in the middle of the season and then right before the trade deadline, so he couldn't get out of there when he wanted to. I think he ended up in a decent situation to kind of build up some momentum going into next free agency to maybe get a bigger deal, but I don't think he expected the entire Cowboys offensive line to also crumble before him. But this is a chance for him to really make a statement because he has an opportunity against a defense that definitely struggles to rush the passer. So he has a definite chance. And if he does well, he does well. And it just is what it is.
I want him to do well. I would like to. I got a little bit of a soft spot for Andy. I feel like he overachieved with the Bengals in a lot of different years, and a heck of a nice guy. And you just, I kind of want to see him do well. And if that ends up being some sort of, I don't know, death knell for this coaching staff or something, I don't know. But I'd like to see him do well. I don't, I don't really have a reason not to. This one's going to be very hard to tell in terms of what direction this is going to go in, John. Do you have a major key to the game, or do you have I don't know, like a thing that the Bengals need to do? Last week against Miami, I said, they kind of need to have one of those big turnovers for touchdowns or something like that. They almost had one, but it was called back. Do you see something similar in order for them to get that unlikely win, or how do you see this playing out?
I think they just got to pressure Dalton. Like, they, of all teams that know how to make Andy Dalton struggle, it's the Bengals. I think there's going to be veterans on their defense that are going to want to take those shots at him just for old time's sake, but also to try to make a statement. This is going to be interesting to see how much fight is actually left with this team going up against the former franchise quarterback. It would be a statement for him, Dalton, to get this win on the road and keep the Cowboys, I guess, somewhat still alive in that terrible NFC East race, which is actually kind of picking up now between Washington and New York, but I digress. I think definitely making Andy Dalton the lesser quarterback out of these two backup quarterbacks is the main key. I don't know what to expect from Zeke at this point. Every time I watch him play, he fumbles or he just doesn't look like how he used to back at Ohio State. But I mean, I know Tony Pollard is capable of kind of going ham against this defense anyway. So, I think it comes down to the defensive line again. Just they have an opportunity to pressure Dalton and to force him to make some bad decisions, and that could keep him in this game. And maybe Brandon Allen gets lucky and they get some more than just one decent drive on offense.
Well, let's call our shot, then we'll drop the mic and get out of here. Talking about the Cowboys coming to Cincinnati, Andy Dalton returning to the Bengals. I would say that, like I said, the Bengals getting a running game going, just even without Joe Mixon, getting a running game going against the porous Dallas Cowboys defense has to be a key for them to get a win or have a chance to win this game. Let's you got a prediction, a funky thing that you want to predict happening. What do you got for us?
I don't know, man. Like I just have just negative interest in this game. It's weird because like I remember when Carson came back and when he was with the Raiders and there was so much hype around that game and Gino sacked him sometime in there and they won easily. I was in the end zone with my dad and we were sitting behind some obnoxious fans. Like the fanfare in this game is obviously down because there won't be any, or there will be minimal fans in the stands, and both teams stink. And I mean, Dalton wasn't supposed to play in this game. Joe Burrow was supposed to play in this game against Dak Prescott. It's like, I don't know. My creativity in terms of predictions is all the way down with this. I don't know how they come back from that showing in Miami. Maybe something happens on the first drive where they make a statement because this Cowboys team is not impressive in the slightest. So I defer to you because I have nothing, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I'm going to set the bar at 2, over or under 2, quote unquote, Andy Dalton moments in this game. What would you take, the over or would you take the under? What I mean is a throw out of bounds on 4th down, a pick six, an accidental fumble. I don't know. I love the guy. I said that, but we can all admit there's been Andy, quote unquote, Andy moments. So
there's going to be multiple of both. I think you're going to see some erratic, crazy scrambles out of clean pockets. You're going to see you're going to see at least one bad throwaway, but you're also going to see just a random out of nowhere clutch moment that he sometimes had. I think they're going to give him an opportunity to do that. I could so easily see him like having a game-winning drive in this game, but I don't think it's going to be that interesting for that to happen. So we'll see. Yeah,
I guess I would. That's a good point to say. I think that pendulum would go both ways. I will say, I set the line at 2, and I'm like, that's what it's going to be. But I guess I will say under. I will say we'll only have one quote unquote Andy moment. I will say that. Let's drop the mic and get on out of here, John. You got any final thoughts for us before we pop on out?
Yeah, on a more positive note, I appreciate what the Bengals, not the football side of things, but the management side of things, I appreciate what they did earlier this week. They partnered up with Black-Owned Outerwear, which is a local outerwear clothing brand run by Means Cameron. He's a local entrepreneur. I think his store is on Elm Street, but they launched a clothing line called Stripes Don't Come Easy. Its whole purpose is to raise awareness for racial inequalities and stuff like that. And also a portion of the proceeds go to Mortar, which is a nonprofit organization also based in Cincinnati with the mission to, elevate these historically marginalized entrepreneurs and help grow their businesses. So appreciate what Elizabeth Blackburn, who is the director of community outreach essentially for the Bengals, appreciate what she has done this season. And we don't really often give these types of endeavors the spotlight that they deserve, but I feel like that this needed a spotlight this week.
Yeah, I like the one that Sam Hubbard was wearing in one of the pictures, that kind of beigey, orangey one with the stripes on the shoulders. I thought that was a cool hoodie, and I think Gio was wearing it too in another picture. Yeah, good stuff. I know you put an article up on Cincy Jungle on that. So if you're wondering kind of what some of that stuff looks like, go check out cincyjungle.com. John put up an article kind of talking about the background on that. Good stuff, John. I want to just kind of, I don't normally do this, do kind of the shout out thing to listeners and stuff, but we've got, I see one here. Some guy. I love you, Anthony. Thanks for being such a loyal Bengals fan, keeping it strong for us. I appreciate that. Some guy. Got a couple of also some messages just out of the blue recently. Matthew S. I shared this with the other podcasters on our channel, but it said, I wanted to stop by and say I love Cincy Jungle and Ace and Zim and all of you guys. I listen to your podcast every day on Pandora. I'm an armored truck driver here in Cincinnati, and your guys' podcasts make the day fly by. I'm a diehard Bengals fan and have been my whole life. A lot of the times towards the end of the week, I re-listen to your guys' stuff because it's so good. Hooday. So like that, there's also one we got from Spencer Myers saying, I don't know how you power through the podcasts and updates. This season is arguably worse than the last, but just know that I look forward to you and John talking about the week before and ahead. Appreciate what you do. So thank you, Spencer. There's a bunch of other people too that have been sending some kind notes, and I know it's easy for Bengals fans to lash out at anybody that's talking about the team, whether, if you don't agree with their opinion or what have you. I just, the comment, John, to me that Spencer said to us, I don't know how you guys do it week in, week out when the team isn't good. Well, it's the fact that listeners like that. And I see another one in here, Jason Von Stein, who's been great to us, and many, many others, Mike Holbrook's in there. So, that's what keeps us going. The listeners, you guys drive the train here.
Spencer, if we're keeping it a buck, I don't know what I'm going to do when and if the Bengals are ever good again. I've never covered them when they are good. This is kind of all I know personally. Like, I was a fan of the team when they were good, and ever since I started, covering them on a more professional basis, they've been one of the worst teams in the NFL. So this is pretty familiar territory for me. So, but I appreciate the shout out.
Yeah, it's a great group of a great group of people, and sometimes I say this on the post game show. It's like, let's virtually group hug. It's kind of a nice therapy session a lot of times when this team isn't good. But thanks for all the kind words there. Our thanks to Tim McGee for joining us. Gave us like 30 minutes. That was freaking awesome. Guy is great. We'll have to have him back again very, very soon. We took too long between the last two times we had him on, but hope you enjoyed that. And our thanks to Mr. McGee. For John Sheeran, I'm Anthony Cosenza. We'll see you next time. Have a good week.